Attendees. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll give everyone 60 seconds or so uh, as we get started. I'm really excited and glad that everyone's been able to join today. If you're having any difficulty hearing at any point, or if there's any difficulty at all with what you're able to receive as an attendee. You can enter that in the Q&A and I will find it there and address it. My name is Roxanne Wright. I am the manager for continuing education at St. Michael's at U of T, and I'm really, really glad to welcome everyone here who's so curious about this exciting topic. Maleeha, can we switch to the next slide, please? Before we
Um,
get going, we're going to do a land acknowledgement.
right. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of St. Michael's College operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land.
Thank you. I'm going to just give a quick introduction to continuing education at St. Mike's. I know that some of you who have registered today will already know us, and welcome back. For those of you who don't know us, I'm very excited to introduce a little bit about our programs, and then I will recede into the background and turn my video off so that we can get to the topic that you've all come to learn more about. Maleeha, can we just go to one next slide, please? So we have a number of programs and courses in addition to the Hope in Action series. We have longer programs in things like social impact measurement, Catholic leadership, interfaith dialogue, teacher education, and social responsibility and sustainability. We have a number of workshops and courses in a creative inquiry environment, including courses in the arts and humanities. And those are really courses that extend the intellectual and academic traditions of St. Mike's into very accessible formats for folks who want to either reconnect with the campus or just learn more. We also have a medieval symposium coming up, which is part of that creative inquiry that's happening later in April. So we're very excited to be a newly renewed division at St. Mike's, and there's so much going on. Always lots to participate in and lots to learn. And if you want to ever learn more about that, of course, Google us. You can visit uoft.me / USMCCE as well. I will also send a follow-up email after this session with a little bit of information with a recording as well. And we will just, yeah, we'll have everything set for you. You don't have to furiously run and grab a pen right this second. I think that was all my slides, Malia. Yes, I'm going to now turn off my video. I will be monitoring the Q&A. Again, if anyone has questions about things unrelated to the session, but related perhaps to the audio, video, those kinds of things, please put your comments there. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Um, we have, sorry, Malia, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. Um, so we are joined today by Maleeha Akhtar. She is a technology and privacy legal counsel at Volkswagen Group of Canada, where she navigates the complex intersection of law, technology, and ethics. Over the past decade, she's advised organizations from Manulife to high growth tech companies on AI governance, privacy law, and responsible technology development. Her career began at the Samsulin Glushko Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, contributing to Supreme Court interventions on digital rights and researching the legal implications of technology. We're also joined today by Anshula Chowdhury. Anshula is the lead instructor for our Social Impact Measurement Professional Certificate at USMC-CE. She is also a technology founder and full stack AI builder who designs production systems for complex regulated environments where getting it wrong has real consequences. With 14 years of experience leading companies, raising capital, and shipping ML and data infrastructure tools, her work focuses on ethical AI, including research on bias detection in knowledge augmented generation architectures, social impact measurement, and innovation policy. She approaches AI with both technical depth and healthy skepticism, using it as a rigorous professional tool rather than an unquestioned automation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Emily, I know we're all really looking forward to the session, so over to you.
Thanks so much. So good afternoon, all. First of all, I wanted to thank the University of Toronto for having me, for Anshula and Roxanne for walking me through this process. I want to begin not by a definition or a case or a statute, but a question that I think most of us in this era have a sense of. What does it mean to be human? When machines can write our briefs, read our faces, predict our choices, and the decisions that shape our lives? So the scale of the shift of this, and I get a sense from every conversation I've been having as I prepared for this talk, is the immediacy of this. The Industrial Revolution took over 80 years to fully reshape the economy. The internet took about 30 years. ChatGPT reached over 100 million users in over 2.5 months. So the argument I want to make, and I'll return to at every time turn, is the challenge of our era is not building smarter machines. It's preserving human agency, dignity, and accountability in a world that is increasingly mediated by these machines. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about what do we mean by AI, what is at stake when we're talking about generative AI and being human, the privacy in the age of AI, the governance around that, some of the specific harms that I want to talk about being the bias, equality, and systemic harm, agency in the age of AI, and then a brief discussion about what the future could look like and what does it mean overall to be in this space at this particular time. But before we can govern something, we need to understand what it is. And there's enormous confusion in the boardroom, in legislative arenas, and frankly, by regular citizens in what AI actually does. So let's draw a very clear line. Traditional software is deterministic. If you do X, the program does Y every time. Spreadsheets, payroll, those are deterministic values. Modern AI is probabilistic. So it is trained on massive data sets and it predicts the most statistically likely output given an input that it's given. It doesn't follow rules, it just infers patterns. So this distinction matters enormously for law because legal systems are dependent on forcibility, causation, and intent. And AI systems introduce a certain amount of grayness when it comes to all of those three things. For example, when Amazon built an AI hiring tool in 2018, it didn't tell the system to discriminate against men. What it did was just it put in a decade of resumes into the system, and because the company mostly hired men, the AI outranked women's resumes that were included in that data set. So that is a very clear example of AI using design to do harm, not exactly with intent. So, and that's a critical clarification. AI systems do not think, they do not understand, they do not exercise judgment, they predict. So AI doesn't know what it's saying, it statistically predicts what is the next input to the output that you provided. So when we call it artificial intelligence, what is more of an accurate framework is a statistical inference at scale. So in that context, that matters enormously because you're trying to understand exactly how that scale works. And in order to understand that, we need to understand what's at stake and what we're trying to protect. In Canadian constitutional jurisprudence, dignity is foundational. Section 7 of the Charter talks about life, liberty, and the security of the person. Section 15 talks about equality. These are not abstract principles. These are foundational concepts on which our democracy and our legal system are based off of. And AI threatens the dignity of those in several ways. It impacts privacy and our right to control information, our autonomy in terms of making our own decisions, the equality, the right to be discriminated, not to be discriminated against by opaque systems, and the freedom from manipulation. An example of this is Clearview scraped billions of photos and social media profiles off the internet and were found lacking and fined accordingly. And sold those facial recognition profiles to law enforcement agencies. And that is a violation of dignity at a scale that we've never ever seen before. And so when you're talking about dignity, you're also talking about agency in terms of how that is structured. And agency is deeper than just pure autonomy. It talks about the capacity to make meaningful decisions and choices, the ability to understand the consequences of those choices, the power to refuse to say no, and the right to remain the decision maker in choices that affect your life. And AI challenges agencies in three very distinct ways. It talks about opacity. When a credit decision is made by a black box model, the individual subject cannot understand and has no access to any recourse mechanisms. Nudging, which I'll refer to back again, which is when a recommendation engine, whether you're on social media, on Instagram, etc., where it will tell you how to believe and what to want and what to fear. These are not neutral information delivery tools. This is behavioral engineering at a very large scale. And similarly, there's an automation bias to this. Humans systemically overtrust automated outputs. There's studies that shows that when doctors are presented with AI diagnoses and their own clinical judgment, studies show that they disproportionately defer to the AI, even when they know that the AI is wrong. Healthcare algorithms in the United States, affecting millions of patients, were systemically undervaluing Black patients and their care needs. The algorithm used healthcare spending as a proxy. So basically, how it works is that because certain populations historically received less care, then they spent less, and because they spent less, the algorithm decided that they cared less about their health, and so that's how some of that structure worked out in place. So when trying to understand kind of how AI is going to be structured for us as citizens, it's important to kind of understand the legal framework. So we're going to be either governed by or hopefully we're going to influence. As a lawyer, I spend every single day reviewing the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, which is called PIPEDA. It is the framework in which the federal framework that structures any private privacy-related work that the government oversees. It's a consent-based model. It requires reasonable purposes. There's accountability in that. But that being said, it hasn't been updated since 2001. And so there's conversations, obviously, about integrating and updating accordingly. Quebec's modernized regime actually is the best privacy framework currently in the country. It requires mandatory privacy impact assessments when AI systems are being introduced. It requires that their organization has obligation in terms of explaining why an automated decision has been made and how it's come to pass. And it also has enhanced penalties. So, for example, worldwide revenue of 4% when customers or citizens' privacy is impacted, which is quite significant and is something that has been lacking in PIPEDA. That being said, over the past 2 or 3 years, we've been talking about developing an Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, which is called ADA, which would be very similar to the Quebec reforms, which would be risk-based regulation. There would be obligations for high impact systems, so like healthcare, justice, insurance, those in the specific industries, and documentation and mitigation requirements for the organization to make sure that they can basically prove that they're doing the best possible way, taking the best possible actions in order to protect privacy of Canadian citizens. So those frameworks look at some key privacy risks. One of those is obviously mass data ingestion. So large language models are trained on enormous amounts of data sets. These sets include personal information, your names, your opinions, photos, correspondence, and often are collected without consent based off the purpose that they're collected. So if you've been following most recently the New York Times and other media outlets are going to have started litigating against OpenAI, et cetera, for using their articles and scraping them off the internet without obviously correct authorization from either the outlet or the actor or the musician that it's collecting that information from. Another key privacy risk that the framework is looking to address is re-identification. So most organizations think that, okay, well, if we aggregate or if we unidentify some of these data sets, then it should be fine. But research has shown that basically a data set that can be re-identified by purely just doing a simple AI search, make sure that they're picking up the additional pieces. The other concern I think that is really important for us in this conversation to understand is inference and profiling, which is where AI systems don't necessarily just process your data. It also infers from that data. So it infers data from that consideration choices that you have never even disclosed. So your browsing patterns can reveal health conditions. Your typing speed can reveal emotional state. So when you're sending emails to your coworkers, be careful. Your location data can reveal religious practice, political affiliation, relationship status. And then at the same time, the key concern for on a largeness of scale is automated decision making, which is AI is being used to make consequential decisions. So like credit approvals, insurance underwriting, employment screening, immigration assessment, with little human review and no meaningful explanation for those results. The legal tension on this obviously is fundamental, but also on a societal level, it's something that we should seriously. So having looked at the framework, looked at the privacy considerations, the next question is really who's accountable for this? And AI systems involve so many different players. When an AI system causes harm, the accountability chain is long and often confusing. So you're taking the foundational model developer, you're taking the organization that actually implemented the model, the deployer that put it in front of the users, the data brokers that provided the data set, and then the end user who relied on that input. So that chain can often be confusing. So one of the landmark cases recently was an Air Canada chatbot that had provided information to a bereaved passenger about bereavement fares. Air Canada argued that the chatbot was actually a separate entity and had its own responsibilities. And the court found that essentially that no, Air Canada was responsible for the chatbot and its outputs. And so it was a key kind of piece in the AI governance conversation in the country. But that being said, not all risks are, and not all governance is the same. So when you think about human in the loop and human in command, so I'll try and kind of very briefly explain this. So human in the loop is when a human is technically present in the process of an automation. Whereas human in command is where the human being has genuine authority, is making independent decisions and using AI as a tool. Both of these principles work very closely together in terms of understanding exactly how we are going to structure the governance of AI as we move forward. But I suspect that it will be a risk-based governance process, very much similar to the EU and GDPR, where we're talking about low, medium, and high risk. Low being like, say, for example, if you use AI to check your grammar in an email, to high risk being you're submitting information about an individual's mortgage status using an AI tool, and as a result impacting their financial decision making. Similarly, individuals affected by AI have a right to a meaningful explanation, not a technical description of what models that is being used to get to some sort of result, but the actual explanation for their particular outcome. And an additional kind of discussion about this is board and executive responsibility. Anybody who thought that AI governance was an IT problem are severely misunderstanding exactly the implications of AI in both private and public life, and understanding exactly the impact that it could have both in organizations as they're building in Canada and globally as well. So one of the most important human rights issues in AI, which are bias, equality, and systemic harm. AI systems learn from historical data. The data reflects the world as it was. It includes its inequities, the exclusions, and its embedded discrimination. Its training data reflects a world where certain groups were disadvantaged, and the AI will often perpetuate and sometimes amplify those disadvantages. So how bias manifests itself is facial recognition systems that have significantly higher errors for darker skinned women than for lighter skinned men, resume screening tools that downrank women or other minority groups, predictive policing tools that concentrate surveillance in already over-policed communities, lending algorithms that charge higher rates not based on individuals but owning neighborhoods or independent and individual risk. These are very key considerations, particularly as Canadians, where we're protected by the charter and also additional legislative tools. And one of those tools is the Canadian Human Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on protected grounds. And so there's no like AI algorithm exception here. Every organization that uses AI within our country specifically has to abide by the Canadian Human Rights Act and all the legislative acts that I referenced before. And I think that but what is new about this is the scale. Like a single human-based biased decision maker affects one person. A biased AI system deployed at scale can affect millions of people simultaneously without each individual's decision appearing with any accountability. And it appears objective, even though it came from a machine. So these are considerations that you should be looking at every time that you're either engaged with AI or considering putting AI in your personal or public life and how that is structured. So AI systems, I kind of want to return to the human dimension, which is not just a legal framework, because as interesting as it is to me, I don't think it's as interesting to everybody else, but the deeper cultural and philosophical considerations here. As I mentioned, AI systems reflect historical data, social inequities, and embedded bias. But it also has significant impacts on how we view agency in the age of AI. An example of this is cognitive offloading, which is a pattern emerging in humans where whenever you interact with AI tools, we outsource thinking that we used to do ourselves. So in the short term, it feels efficient, right? Like we memorize phone numbers. Why memorize phone numbers when you can put when your phone stores them? Why draft a contract clause from scratch when AI will do it in seconds? For all lawyers on this call, please don't do that. I'm looking at several of you. But the fact is that this tendency to offload cognitive and reasoning is a concern, and it's something that we will need to address as these tools become more and more prevalent, particularly in spaces such as with children in schools, and also with seniors who tend to be much more susceptible to such options. Also, the other thing that we need to talk about is algorithmic nudging, which is personalization engines that, like, for example, the algorithms determine what you see on social media, what news you see, how you read it, what products you buy. These are not neutral. They are optimized for engagement, which often means optimizing for emotional arousal. So you're outraged, you have fear, or you have some sort of desire. That the engine itself is intended to do so. And this is not just a social media concern, it is a democracy and governance concern. When the information environment of citizens is algorithmically curated to maximize engagement rather than accuracy or breadth, the foundation of informed public decision making is undermined. So, in order to preserve this agency that we're talking about, there are several key concepts that I think should be the core of our conversation. That for human agency to exist, a right is to we should have a right to meaningful human review. We should have a right to contest automated decisions, a right to explanation for such decisions, and a right to disengage from AI systems if we so choose. And that would mean culturally, we must teach AI literacy, maintain certain human skills, and resist passive acceptance of machine outputs. AI should essentially augment human judgment, never replace human responsibility. So let me bring this to a close with what I believe is the core choice of our era. We face two paths. Do we allow AI systems to structure our society invisibly, optimizing for efficiency, engagement, or profit without meaningful democratic input or accountability? In this path, the law becomes reactive, always chasing the least harm and the last harm rather than shaping the next system. Or do we embed law, values, and accountability into AI by design, building governance frameworks and treat AI not as a force of nature, but as a force of human choice, subject to human values? The second path requires three things and is much, much harder. We require regulatory ambition. Our key stakeholders need to make decisions that sometimes will come across as unpopular, but are required in order to manage regulation. There should be corporate accountability, boards and executives who treat AI governance as a fiduciary obligation, not a PR exercise, and civic literacy, something that all of you are doing here today. An informed public that understands enough about AI to participate meaningfully in decisions about how it governs their lives. None of this is easy, but it is necessary, and it is the work of lawyers like myself, policymakers, educators, and citizens together. That technology is not destiny, and governance is design. I want to, sorry. I want to close with something a little bit more personal. I've spent years as a legal counsel advising organizations on privacy and technology. And what I've observed is that the hardest questions are never purely technical. They're always ultimately human questions. What do we owe each other? What interests matter? Who gets to decide? Being human in the age of AI means retaining moral judgment and refusing to outsource it to a model, preserving privacy as an expression of dignity, not just a compliance checkbox, insisting on accountability, demanding to know who's responsible when things go wrong, protecting equality, ensuring that the efficiencies of AI are not purchased at the cost of fairness, and that we're also exercising agency and remaining the authors of our own decisions. The measure of progress is not how intelligent our machines become. It's whether humans remain the authors of their decisions as those machines become more and more integrated into our society. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll open it up for questions. Thank you so much, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Maleeha. Lots of great questions coming in. Please, for everyone listening in, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A section. I did want to just ask a question from Maria, who needs to jump off, and then I'll get to the other ones in the queue. Her question was around what do you think is missing from the popular discourse around AI? What should we be talking about more or even less?
I think the conversation around technology companies such as OpenAI and Anthropic are interesting, and I think that there's certain reasons why that is interesting. But I think it misses the conversations around them misses the actual utility and the use of AI and focuses on the companies who are producing just one part of that model. So and there does seem to be this societal kind of concern about how AI was going to replace us and all of those things. So I think that the conversation around fear and also disengagement that I'm seeing from a lot of people is because there are certain organizations that are hoping that you disengage from this conversation. It makes it easier to pass initiatives without pushback. So I think that the thing that we should be doing much more of is educating groups around us, taking classes, whether it's online or otherwise. Make sure that you're vetting your sources, and then asking questions, coming to these conversations where people are talking about it, and hopefully educating yourself on exactly hopefully what the framework is, but then also how you engage with it in a way that protects your privacy and also you know hopefully benefits your life in some way.
Right. Yeah, and I think that the concepts you had around autonomy versus agency are so key in that. I found that particularly enlightening. Moving on, Bernadette had a question about what happened to the phrase of garbage in, garbage out, garbage out. It looks like this computer concept has gone by the wayside. Do you have any comments on that?
I think it's the same. If you have a really terrible data set, and it goes back to some of the examples I cited about discrimination. If you have a data set essentially that is garbage and you're inputting it into an AI, there are AI systems that are getting better and better at correcting. So, for example, you will say you put in a phone number for a publicly available individual from a website and it's incorrect, the system will go back, scrape the internet, see, make sure that and double check. So in that context, there is certain mechanisms at play, but it is not in perfect by any means. And so that's where kind of it goes back to making sure that you're aware, making sure you're educated, and that when you do see something or when you are engaging with these systems, understand that they're fallible in that way.
Thank you. Next question from John. So, what do you think about AI and how it's affecting the human element in the classroom from both the student perspective and the teacher perspective?
I think it's interesting because I was just recently talking to a couple of unions about this conversation, and I think that in the classroom, I would approach it as just as another tool, very similar to how we've introduced whether it's internet use or something like that in the classroom. I do think that school boards are going to come across this very soon. Universities are already struggling with figuring out how to understand plagiarization, etc. Because sometimes some professors will get the exact same essay that looks exactly the same with the exact same mistakes. So there is these kind of I wouldn't say growing pains, but concerns that exist in the educational market. But I do think that the overarching benefit to education will be quite significant. I think people who were disengaged from education in certain ways will find systems and methods using AI systems that will be really beneficial to them. But this is, we are just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the conversation about how it's going to affect education, particularly for attention spans and also engagement and like how teachers intend to use it. I would look to administrators both on the board level, the provincial level, and the federal level to make those decisions.
Thank you. Question from Edith. So cognitive offloading is a very real thing in students taking college courses that she teaches. It's almost like they really don't care. They just want an easy way out. I almost fear for the future. What exactly should AI literacy include? How can we make students care enough to think their own thoughts?
I like, as somebody who uses AI every day, I think one of the ways that I find using it in terms of education very helpful is as a kind of as a starting point, just to, and I say this starting point as in like in addition to all the other resources that I have. So I think that, the conversation really shouldn't be about, oh, well, we shouldn't use this and we should continue the path that we've already aligned, and that anything AI related is quote unquote wrong. But I do think that, yeah, critical reasoning is one of the key pieces. If you've been following some of the conversation in the tech space about from especially a lot of the CEOs in these AI organizations, a lot of them are talking about how critical humanities are. So like understand like the use of language, understanding exactly how to critically think, professions like law, etc. I eventually there should be literacy in terms of understanding exactly what you are seeing and how you are seeing, and making sure that it's real. But also I think that it is a responsibility on the teachers and the boards to make sure that they're addressing exactly what's happening in their schools. I think, putting your head in the sand is not the way to move forward with this for sure.
Okay, great. We have one more question from Maria as well. Great question. So what do you think of AIDA? The
I think so. Initially, how IDA was supposed to work out was it was supposed to be kind of a separate act that worked individually, specifically to tech spaces. Now, what I'm seeing from conversations with people that are in the legislative branch, it does seem to be that there's going to be an update of PIPEDA, and then there will be AI specific regulations in each act. So the Human Rights Act might have additional language. There might be additional language with the Employment Standards Act to make sure that any AI usage by an employer has to be understanding and respectful of an employee's autonomy, and that they are not subject to automated decision making that would affect that in any way or impact their employment. So I think that it's going to be much more of an attempt to address that. I hope that at some point we do have significant AI legislation. But what we've seen in Europe with GDPR and the new AI Act that they're putting into place, they do seem to coalesce very nicely. And I'm hoping that we do the same here in Canada.
Okay, great. Thank you. And from Hugh, part of the problem is the inequality of two sides of this transaction. So we have a lot of monopolistic structures in the economy, one of those being around large language models and the companies that kind of proliferate them. And that leads to a dynamic where we have citizens and customers with less power and corporations with more of it. What policies would you kind of consider to address this?
If I had a magic wand, I think that the conversation around corporate responsibility would be very key for me. I think that having those accountability structures does create a trickle-down effect, because then on the board and the executive level, then they are concerned. They're, when you're talking about 4% of worldwide turnover for a lot of these major technology companies, that's upwards of $1 billion, $2 billion a year. And that's where it hurts for, when we're talking about inequalities, right? And so I think that if I had like I said, a magic wand, corporate responsibility and accountability structures would be key. And I think also, and some organizations do it better than others, but I do think that any massive corporation that's doing it right now would benefit both the corporation and the employee. I think the inequalities within the society that we're talking about, I think only are addressed by engaging with and educating yourself on this, on all of these changes. By disengaging and by frankly kind of like deciding that either this is just going to overtake my life and I just need to passively accept that, I think that will put both individuals and society in general at on the back front for sure.
Thank you. From Florida, I have long felt that the curriculum in Ontario is too focused on content as opposed to building skills, especially critical thinking skills. Do you agree that strong critical thinking skills are more important than ever in this age of AI?
Yes, absolutely. I can't speak specifically to Florida or any other country in terms of their educational systems, but what I can say is that critical thinking will be the key thing. I cannot tell you how many times a day I will get a link or a video sent to me by any of my friends, and they're asking me, "Is this real? It makes sense?" And then and often what I used to say was yes, no, or like I'd respond, and now I often ask, well, what do you think, and how do you think, and which source did you get this from, and so like having those questions to allow for that conversation to exist between even in my personal life, I think has been really important. And so I think that that's a conversation that on an individual basis we should all be having. So making sure that the sources are correct, making sure that you're not relying on rage bait or anything like that, and understanding exactly how these algorithms are set to continue to build engagement. For them, the longer you are using these systems, the better it is. And using them passively without education, I think is to your detriment.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting going back to that idea of autonomy versus agency. A lot of the conversations I have in the field are with people feeling like they are losing agency because of AI. And one of the takeaways I got from your presentation was that actually there's a higher requirement for agency today, because there's things that can we can use that are behaving autonomously. We need to maintain and actually grow the level of agency that we are proactively and explicitly bringing to our work and our lives.
I agree, and I think it goes back to kind of my initial point was that when a society has a significant amount of time to process a change, say like the Industrial Revolution or the internet, even the internet still feels quite new for a lot of people. And I'm not saying like the internet as a infrastructure, but the internet as its impact on their day-to-day lives still feels quite new for a lot of people. We just don't have the time to process. Like, if you're in the tech space, you're hearing about new models every couple of days. You're hearing about new systems and startups that are coming up. And then on outside of the tech space, you're being told certain things. And most of those things might have value, but those narratives are shaped by many pieces that you need to actually engage with. And I think it's really important as citizens that we do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And sorry, I should have clarified. So Florida is the name of the person, not the geography.
Oh, right. Okay.
Um,
I would
okay.
like to be in Florida, though. It does seem a little cold.
Yeah, exactly. A question from Hugh. So, do you think consumers will soon have their own AI agents working for them, and will these agents have fiduciary responsibilities?
Yes and yes. I think that eventually what you would have is an agent that would help you either manage your professional or your personal life. They would have access to and under the parameters, hopefully, and secure privacy parameters that will make your life hopefully easier in certain ways, and also help you get to the goals that you've set for yourself, and eventually they will have fiduciary responsibilities, I believe. Yes.
Could you elaborate on that? Like, when you say fiduciary responsibilities, how would that, what kind of legal framework would be in place for that, or what kind of accountability frameworks?
I suspect that what essentially will happen is that if your agent is making significant choices on your behalf, like say for example setting up your home insurance or are following up on a renewal of your prescriptions, things like that, then you would have it would have a responsibility caked in to basically ask you. So it would have for certain significant decisions that you would set the parameters that that I would have to, and this goes back to human in the loop and human in command, right? So the agent is to your benefit. It will hopefully check with you to make sure that your prescription is correct, and then you would just say yes or no. Sometimes either via text or whatever medium you choose to use, and then it will go off and make those decisions. So I think that the fiduciary responsibility in of a sense the parameters you're setting for the agent. And then I think that there's going to be a lot more education and hopefully companies coming up that will help you manage that in a way that makes sense.
Great. Thank you so much. So we also have a question on kind of AI note takers in a health setting. So can you explain how that works? I think we've probably all at this point had an experience where someone has, or a doctor or whoever has asked us if they can take AI, have an AI take notes for them, which presumably would help them focus more on the meeting, etc.
Mhm.
Um, how does this work? And what are the kind of implications for information in this context?
So AI note takers in general are very effective for most situations. In healthcare, it's a very touchy subject, and ideally, it should be one that is very, very closely studied before it's implemented. Basically, the way it works is that a note taker would be listening in on your conversation while you're doing a consult with the doctor, and then providing meeting notes, and then helping kind of figuring out any diagnoses or any additional pieces. Your medical history would be within your own system, and so the note taker would be able to kind of implement that directly. The problem, not the problem, but the concern with those is obviously privacy. Your medical information could be hacked, and then it would be there out in the dark web or other places. And then so that is like an external actor that would impact your privacy. The other concern is that the note taker gets it wrong. So, for example, if you have, you're supposed to get 100, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, but like 100 grams of something, and it incorrectly puts in 1,000, that obviously that has a significant impact on how you manage your health. So that's where the kind of the doctor's like final review will be really important. But in terms of kind of health law, there are significant restrictions around this in Canada, on both on the federal and the provincial level, on how health data is managed, and to make sure that we're addressing that. I suspect that that is another example of where ADA or AI provisions will be put into place to make sure that, and also regulated bodies like the OMA and et cetera will be letting their doctors know, okay, these are approved AI note takers. We've gone through a review of their privacy implications. We've gone through like their compliance issues and agreed that these are ones we agree with, if you choose to use them. And then the body would then move it on to the individual doctors.
Okay, great. Just as a follow-up question, this is just for me, area of interest. For that kind of situation, is the information that is being picked up by the AI also being used to train the foundation models that underlie those types of services?
So what happens is that and I say this as somebody in the automotive industry, any AI agreements, I've seen over the past, I would say, year and a half, if 2 years, since the kind of explosion in the mainstream of AI, because AI has been around since like the 70s, as you know. But all those all those agreements have provisions specifically citing that those models will not learn from customer data. And it is a key factor in how AI is managed on the enterprise level and also on the level that we're talking about, like in terms of healthcare institutions.
Right. But on that note, I mean, there's lots of provisions stopping people from using like books and things like that for this type of training. So there's the legal implication of, yes, you're not allowed, like you have to respect IP, you have to respect privacy, and the sanctions for not following these are actually pretty limited.
Mhm.
And so I think it's another example where agency around these conversations and being informed around them can really help
Yes,
support.
of course. And like the thing is that copyright and use of, say, for example, a really good one of this was like Scarlett Johansson's voice that was used by ChatGPT. And she openly said, I didn't agree with this, and they had a settlement after. That is one level. But when you're talking about using specifically citizens' health data to teach a language model. Often that is a technology company based out of the US or any other space, that the requirements are very significant, and it's a very significant conversation. Like you will spend weeks and weeks just negotiating on the AI piece.
Okay, great. Thank you. So another question, how is there a way for consumers, citizens to really be aware of when we are sharing information with AI? What do you recommend we do to take action as citizens to protect our own rights? And so I think lots of places where like AI agents are being used without necessarily being explicitly stated as such.
So often, if as a consumer, if an AI agent is going to be used, they will require consent. So they will say, "Do you consent to talking to chatbot to answer your customer question before you go and talk to a human agent?" So in that context, you say no, and if that is what you choose to do, and then you can move on to a human agent. So often, when it's a consumer-facing piece, they will require consent. That being said, that consent is not always requested, and it is not always something that you have control over. And that's where kind of that education piece comes into play, and making sure you understand exactly how these language models are learning from your data, making sure that you're using efficient data deletion methods when you're using these models, even on your web browser, etc., like that. Those are very, very key. And it seems innocuous, but it generally does work.
Right. Okay, that's great. Any thoughts around national sovereignty and AI data sovereignty and kind of use of this technology within the context of Canada and obviously having some of the pressures on our national sovereignty that we've experienced over the last year?
Yeah, I think that is the key conversation that's happening right now, both on the Hill and in tech spaces, particularly when, a lot of the infrastructure that of most organizations on the IT level is based off of US companies like Microsoft, etc. Some of them so in Canada, for example, we have specific either data centers or privacy legislation to make sure that that Canadian data doesn't go cross border. And if it does, then there's an assessment that's done. Quebec's Law 25 does a really good job of this, where it says that anytime that data is Quebec data is being moved even to different province, there an assessment has to be made. And I suspect that that's where Canada is going to be going in the future. Data sovereignty is going to be a huge conversation that we're going to have in the next over the next 3 or 4 years, particularly as the political situation unfolds in the US and other areas. The EU as a whole is already starting making conversations about creating an EU cloud. I suspect that Canada will do the same. I know that the Prime Minister has indicated that he advocates for it. So I think that is the logical step in terms of protecting Canadian citizens' data.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maleeha. So thank you everyone for your questions. That was a very interesting session. I certainly learned quite a bit. And Maleeha, if I could just ask you to go to the very last slide before I do that, do you have any last kind of thoughts in the last couple of minutes? And then we'll hand it back over to Roxanne to wrap things up.
Sure. I think that, based off these questions, and obviously as I was preparing for this talk, one of the things that, one of the words I thought a lot about was hope and hopelessness. And, it is easy to feel hopeless at a time when technology seems like a part of every single conversation that you're having. It is part of how Roxanne and I started having this conversation about doing this talk. So if you take anything away from this chat, I hope that you take away this idea or this concept that, educate yourself, have these conversations both with your friends, your family, with your policy, whether it's your politicians or members of parliament, but have them and start engaging in this space. Make sure that these tools are made for us to protect us, to work and to better the human experience, and not the other way around. So just do what you can, and please take it, don't be overwhelmed. Just take it a little bit at a time, and any engagement is always welcome in all the spaces I'm in. So I hope you do that.
Thank you so much, Maleeha. That was great. And Roxanne, over to you.
Thank you so much. So, as I mentioned previously, this is a speaker series. So this was the first of our talks on hope in action, and we have another talk coming up in April with Dr. Shilpa Tiwari, who is our diploma lead for social responsibility and sustainability. She will be speaking to with Dr. Golnaz Golnaragi on inclusive change in uncertain times, exploring how leaders guide organizations through strain, conflict, and change. And then we have a session coming up in May on better conversations to thrive in difficult times. And that one's with Dr. Hae-Sun Moon and Malcolm Gilderdale, and they will be examining language and communication techniques for a more hopeful future. I will be sending, as I mentioned, a follow-up with links to all these wonderful things, a recording of this session, and I will also share an email address for continuing ed. You're always welcome to reach out to us with any questions or comments at any time. I'm going to end this session, so don't be surprised when it closes and you get kicked out. But please know that I'm very grateful to everyone who joined us for this hour. I'm really grateful to Maleeha for sharing her expertise, and to Anshula for her wise conversational style, and to both of these amazing women for bringing this very complicated, very noisy topic into focus for us in such an engaging way. Thank you so much. We will speak very soon, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks again, everybody.